To the world, we were the ultimate example of a perfect Christian family, 19 siblings, one massive house, and a life filled with matching outfits and constant smiles. But behind those closed doors in Arkansas, the reality was far more sinister than any camera ever captured. For 20 years, we were trained to be performers in a play we never auditioned for. We were taught that silence was a virtue and that our Father's word was absolute law. But while the cameras were rolling, a culture of fear, control, and deep-seated secrets was festering beneath the surface. From a blanket training babies to breaking the spirits of young girls, we weren't just a family, we were a social experiment. Tonight, I am breaking the ultimate rule, I am telling the truth. I'm going to reveal the hidden scandals, the psychological manipulation, and the dark rules that turned our home into a golden cage. You think you know the Duggars? You don't. It's time to look into the shadows. To the world looking in, our life was a dream of simplicity and faith. But to those of us living inside that massive house in Tontatown, Arkansas, it was a carefully constructed fortress of control. To understand the dark reality of the Duggar family, you have to understand the architect behind it all, my father, Jim Bob, and the radical teachings of the IBLP, the Institute in Basic Life Principles. We weren't just a large family, we were the flagship for a movement. My father didn't see us as children with individual spirits. He saw us as soldiers for a cultural war. From the time we could crawl, every minute of our day was scheduled, monitored, and analyzed. We lived under what was called the umbrella of protection. It sounds beautiful, doesn't it? A father protecting his family from the rain of the world. But in reality, that umbrella was a shield that kept out the light. The rules were absolute. We were taught that the world outside our gates was a den of sin waiting to swallow us whole. Because of this fear, we were never allowed to be alone, not even with our own thoughts. Television was a portal for the devil. Music with a beat was a drum for rebellion. Even the books we read had to be approved by my father. We were homeschooled not just to learn, but to be insulated from any idea that didn't align with my father's vision. One of the most chilling aspects of our upbringing was blanket training. It started when we were just infants. A baby would be placed on a blanket with a toy just out of reach. If the baby crawled off the blanket to reach for it, they were disciplined. The goal was to break the child's will before they even had a voice. By the time we were toddlers, we didn't need to be told to obey. We were terrified of the consequences of our own curiosity. This wasn't just parenting, it was psychological conditioning. We were taught the concept of keep sweet. No matter how tired we were, no matter how much we were hurting or frustrated, we had to wear a smile. A frown was considered a countenance problem, a sign that you were harboring a rebellious heart. We became experts at wearing masks. We would stand in front of the TLC cameras, grinning ear to ear, while inside we were suffocating. My father's control extended even to our bodies. The way we dressed, the long skirts, the modest necklines, wasn't just about faith. It was about the idea that a woman's body was a potential stumbling block for men. We were taught that we were responsible for the thoughts of every man who looked at us. This placed a heavy burden of shame on young girls who were still trying to understand who they were. And then there was the financial control. Every penny earned from the show, every bit of our labor in the family businesses, it all went through my father. We were grown adults, some of us in our 20s, with no bank accounts, no social security numbers in our possession, and no way to leave. We were famous around the world, yet we were essentially indentured servants in our own home. We lived in a house of 20 people, but it was the loneliest place on earth. You couldn't confide in a sibling because we were encouraged to report. on one another for our own spiritual good. Trust was a luxury we couldn't afford. We were constantly told that the heart is deceitful above all things, so we learned not even to trust ourselves. As the cameras rolled for 19 kids and counting, my father was building an empire on our backs. He sold the world a lie of a happy, debt-free, harmonious family, but as the segments of this story unfold, you will see that the price of that perfection was our childhood, our freedom, and for some of us, our very souls. This was the golden cage, and for a long time, we thought the bars were there for our protection. We were wrong. If segment 1 was about the rules of the house, segment 2 is about what happened when those rules were broken and the devastating way the truth was buried. You see, in a family that prides itself on being the ultimate example of morality, a scandal isn't just a mistake. It's an existential threat to the brand. And for the Duggars, the brand was everything. The shadow that hung over our home for years had a name, Josh. To the public, he was the golden child, the eldest son, the one who would lead the next generation. But behind the scenes, a nightmare was unfolding. When the first signs of his disturbing behavior came to light, acts committed against his own sisters, the response from my parents wasn't to call the police. It wasn't to seek professional psychiatric help for a predator in the making. Instead, they turned inward. They treated a crime like a sin that could be prayed away. We were told that as Christians, we had to forgive. But in our house, forgiveness was often used as a weapon to silence the victims. Imagine being a young girl traumatized in your own bed and being told by your parents that you must not only forgive your abuser, but that you must also keep it a secret to protect the ministry. The burden of the family's reputation was placed squarely on the shoulders of the children who had already been hurt. This created a toxic culture of the cover up. My father, Jim Bob, knew that if the truth ever got out, the TLC contracts would vanish, the political influence would evaporate, and the IBLP empire would crumble. So, the safety of the daughters was traded for the success of the show. We were given biblical counseling by people within our own radical circle, people who told us that perhaps we hadn't been modest enough, or that our own hearts weren't right with God. The psychological toll of this was immeasurable. When you are taught that your abuser is just a struggling sinner, and you are the one holding the secret that could destroy your family, you stop trusting your own reality. You start to feel like the villain for even having feelings of anger or pain. We watched Josh get married, start a family, and become a public figure for family values, all while we carried the weight of what he had done. It was a slap in the face every single day. But the darkness didn't stop there. The cover-up culture extended to every part of our lives. If someone was struggling with depression, they were told they weren't praying hard enough. If someone questioned the IBLP teachings, they were labeled as rebellious and isolated. My father used a tactic called shunning or disassociating to keep everyone in line. If you didn't follow the script, you were cut off, not just from money, but from the siblings you loved. For years, we lived in a state of hyper-vigilance. We were constantly scanning for the next explosion, the next secret that might leak, the next time my father would have to circle the wagons. We became masters of the Duggar smile, that glazed look in the eyes that says everything is fine while the world is burning down around you. The most tragic part is that because the early issues were covered up, instead of dealt with, they only grew. The rot stayed in the foundation, and eventually, the whole house began to lean. When the scandals finally broke into the mainstream media years later, it wasn't a surprise to us. It was a long overdue reckoning. But by then, the damage to our hearts and our faith was already done. We realized that the people who were supposed to be our protectors were actually the ones keeping us in the line of fire, all for the sake of a television camera and a paycheck. A next step, this covers the second 10-12 minutes. Shall I proceed with segment 3, the Great Awakening, the Rebellion, focusing on how sisters like Jill and Duggar finally broke free, and the chaos it caused within the family. The first cracks in the fortress didn't come from the outside, they came from within, as some of us began to realize that the umbrella of protection was actually a cage of isolation. For decades, we were taught that leaving the family's authority meant spiritual death, but for sisters like Jill and Duggar, it became the only way to survive. The awakening started slowly, a realization that the world wasn't the monster our father described, and that the real danger was the silence we were forced to maintain. When Jill and her husband Derek began to ask questions about the family's finances and why the children weren't being paid for their labor on the show, the mask finally slipped. My father's reaction wasn't one of a loving parent, but of a CEO protecting his assets. Jill was marginalized, painted as a grabble, and eventually she was effectively banned from the family home unless my father was present. This was the ultimate betrayal. After years of raising her younger siblings and being the perfect daughter, she was discarded the moment she demanded her own agency. Then came Duggar's transformation. Moving to Los Angeles and experiencing a different world allowed her to see the IBLP teachings for what they really were, a cult-like structure built on fear, not faith. Watching her trade the long skirts for pants and start thinking for herself sent shockwaves through the family. My father saw this as a direct attack on his legacy. The keep sweet mantra was no longer working. The siblings were starting to talk to each other outside of the monitored family group chats, and the secrets we had been told to bury were starting to surface. The cost of this liberty was high. It meant being excluded from family weddings, being talked about in hushed tones at holiday gatherings, and facing the public wrath of a father who controlled the narrative. But for the first time, some of us were breathing. We were learning that God's love didn't require us to be silent about our pain. The rebellion wasn't about hate. It was about the desperate need to be human, to be whole, and to finally walk away from a system that valued the image of a family more than the souls of the children within it. The final collapse of the Duggar empire didn't happen overnight, but when it came, it was absolute. The arrest and subsequent conviction of Josh was the inevitable end to a story built on cover-ups and denied reality. When federal agents entered our world, the umbrella finally shattered. The show was canceled, the money stopped flowing, and the family was forced to face a truth that could no longer be prayed away. My father's influence, once so powerful in politics and religion, withered under the harsh light of justice. In the aftermath, we were left to pick up the pieces of our shattered identities. For those of us who stayed, the house felt like a tomb of memories we wanted to forget. For those who left, the journey of deconstruction began, the painful process of unlearning every principle we had been fed since birth. We had to learn how to make our own decisions, how to manage our own money, and most importantly, how to trust our own hearts. We realized that the world wasn't our enemy, the lies we had been told about ourselves were. Today, the Duggar family is a house divided. Some still cling to the old ways, afraid of the light, while others have found peace in the truth. We are no longer the perfect family on the magazine covers, and that is the greatest blessing of all. We are broken, messy, and healing. We are learning that true faith doesn't need a camera crew or a set of rigid rules to survive. It needs honesty. My journey at 35, becoming a mother for the first time in a world far away from that Arkansas house, is my final act of defiance. I am raising my child with the one thing I never had the freedom to be themselves. The cycle of control ends with me. The dark reality of our past will always be a part of our story, but it no longer defines our future. We have stepped out from the shadow of the umbrella and into the sunlight, and for the first time in my life, I am not afraid. But the true end didn't begin with a sister walking away or a book being published. It began with the sound of heavy boots on the ground and the cold reality of a federal investigation. For years, my father had convinced us that, as long as we followed the principles, we were untouchable. He believed his political connections and his standing in the church would protect the family empire from any storm. But even the strongest umbrella cannot shield you from the truth when it finally decides to pour. When the news broke that federal agents had raided Josh's place of business, the atmosphere inside our home shifted from performative peace to pure, unadulterated panic. This wasn't a family matter anymore. It wasn't something that could be handled with a family meeting or a round of prayer. This was the United States government versus the secrets we had been told to keep for decades. Watching the legal process unfold was like watching a slow-motion car crash. We were forced to see evidence that was so dark, so stomach-turning that it shattered any remaining illusions of Josh's redemption. The most heartbreaking part wasn't the trial itself, but the way our parents chose to react. Instead of standing for the protection of children and the truth, the focus remained on damage control. We watched as money was poured into a legal defense that seemed to ignore the gravity of the crimes. The family was split down the middle. Some siblings stood in a courtroom witnessing the horror firsthand, while others were still being told to stay loyal to the family name. The tension was thick enough to suffocate us. We realized then that the system we were raised in, the IBLP and our father's rules, wasn't designed to stop a predator, it was designed to hide one. The trial was a mirror held up to our entire upbringing. It exposed every crack in the foundation. It showed the world that when you suppress children, when you hide sins instead of healing them, and when you value image over integrity, the result is catastrophic. When the guilty verdict was read, it wasn't just Josh who was convicted in our eyes. It was the entire philosophy of our childhood. The empire was gone. The show was dead. And for those of us who had been waiting for the truth to set us free, the silence that followed the verdict was the first time we felt we could finally breathe, even if that breath was heavy with grief. In the wake of the trial, I found myself standing in the ruins of the only life I had ever known. Everything I had been taught was a lie, and yet I was 30 years old and didn't know how the real world worked. This is the part people don't see on the news. The deconstruction, it is the grueling, painful process of taking apart your own brain, piece by piece, and asking, is this what I believe? Or is this just what I was told to say? I had to learn things that most teenagers know by heart. I had to learn how to manage a bank account that my father didn't control. I had to learn that the world outside wasn't a dark, scary place waiting to destroy me, but a beautiful, complex world full of kind people who didn't care about my family name. The most difficult part was rediscovering my faith. For so long, God was presented to me as a cosmic version of my father, a strict judge waiting for me to fail. I had to walk away from that version of God to find the one who actually loves the broken and the silenced. The journey to my 35th year has been the hardest path I've ever walked. It involved years of therapy, many nights of crying until my eyes were swollen, and the terrifying decision to set boundaries with my own parents. When I met my husband, I saw for the first time what a healthy relationship looked like. One built on mutual respect, not umbrellas of authority. And then the miracle happened. Becoming a mother changed everything. As I hold my child, I look into their eyes and I make a silent promise every single day: you will never be blanket trained. You will never be told that your voice doesn't matter. You will never be forced to smile when your heart is breaking. Your clothes will not be your identity, and your father will be your protector, not your master. This is my true legacy. Not a TV show, not a political movement, and not a massive house built on secrets. My legacy is the freedom of the next generation. We are the survivors. We are the ones who made it out. And as the sun sets on the Arkansas house, it is finally rising on a life that is truly, beautifully mine. Thank you for walking through the shadows of my past with me today. It wasn't easy to share these truths, but silence is no longer an option when freedom is at stake. My story is proof that no matter how deep the darkness or how strong the cage, there is always a way out. To anyone out there who feels controlled, silenced, or lost in their own waiting season, please know that your voice matters and your breakthrough is coming. Don't let anyone else write your story. The pen is finally in your hands. If this journey through the reality of the Duggar family touched your heart, or if you believe in the power of the truth, please give this video a like. It helps this story reach others who might need to hear it. I want to hear from you. What part of this story resonated with you the most? Drop a comment below. I'll be reading and replying to as many as I can. We are building a community of healing here, and your voice is a vital part of it. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. I have so much more to share about my new life, my journey into motherhood, and the lessons I've learned along the way. And finally, if you know someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to start over, please share this video with them. Thank you for being part of my miracle. I love you all. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay brave and keep the faith.